Somewhere on the drying grasslands of ancient Africa, the story goes, a hungry ape crouches over a pile of dung and finds a small mushroom growing out of it. It eats, and the world cracks open, colours sharpen, patterns bloom behind its eyes. And in that moment, so the legend says, something flickers awake in the animal that had never been awake before, the human mind. It is one of the most seductive origin stories ever told, that we did not climb to intelligence by slow, grinding accident, but that we were switched on by a mushroom. It's called the stoned ape theory, and most scientists will tell you flatly that it's wrong. They're mostly right. But here's the strange part, the part that keeps this idea alive. Hidden inside this folklore is something measurably true. That mushroom really does rewire the brain. We can watch it happen now, neuron by neuron in a laboratory. There's even a number for how much it changes in a single dose, and it's bigger than you'd think. And the newest twist of all, that rewiring might not even need the trip. So tonight we take this idea apart. What's myth? What's astonishingly real? And what a mushroom can and cannot do to a mind. The idea has a single author, a man named Terence McKenna. McKenna was a writer, an ethnobotanist, and one of the most spellbinding talkers of the 20th century, a kind of psychedelic bard. And in 1992, in a book called Food of the Gods, he laid out his great claim. Picture the deep past. Africa is drying. The forests our ancestors lived in are breaking into open grassland, and they come down out of the trees to follow the herds across the plains. And everywhere the herds go, they leave dung, and in that dung, in the warm African dirt, grows a particular mushroom, one we now call psilocybin cubensis, the magic mushroom. McKenna imagined our ancestors eating these mushrooms again and again, across thousands of years, and he proposed it worked on a ladder of 3 steps. In small amounts, the mushroom sharpened their eyesight, making them better hunters. In larger amounts, it stirred energy and arousal so they had more children. And in the largest amounts, it threw the doors of the mind wide open, flooding it with visions, with inner music, with the first stirrings of language, of religion, of art. In other words, McKenna believed the human mind didn't slowly evolve. He believed it was catalyzed, lit like a fuse, by a chemical we found in the dirt. It is a gorgeous story. The question is whether any of it is true. And here is where it gets genuinely strange. Because when scientists finally put psilocybin, the active molecule in those mushrooms, under a microscope, they found something McKenna could only have dreamed of. When you eat a magic mushroom, your body converts the psilocybin in it into a molecule called psilocin. And that molecule fits, like a key into a lock, into a specific receptor on your brain cells, the serotonin 2A receptor. And the brain cell does something remarkable. It starts to grow. In 2021, a team of neuroscientists watched this happen in living brains. They gave a single dose of psilocybin and looked directly at the neurons. The branches of a brain cell are studded with tiny nubs called dendritic spines, the points where one neuron reaches out and touches another. They are, quite literally, the hardware of thought. And after that one dose, the spines began to multiply. Within 24 hours, the density of these connections had risen by about 7%. And a week later, here's that number. They were still about 12% higher than before. New connections sprouted in days, and they stayed. This is so striking that scientists coined a word for molecules that do it: psychoplastogens. From plastic, meaning moldable, and gene, to create, mind molders, substances that, in a single exposure, throw the brain into a state of heightened growth. So when McKenna said the mushroom rewires the brain, he wasn't being poetic. At the level of the single synapse, that is exactly, physically, what it does. But growing new wires is only half of it, because psilocybin doesn't just build, it also briefly takes things apart. Deep in your brain sits a network neuroscientists call the default mode network, the headquarters of your sense of self, the part that hums away constantly, narrating your life, holding the story of who you are. And when researchers scanned people on psilocybin, they watched that network go quiet. It powers down. And as it does, regions of the brain that normally never speak to each other suddenly light up and start talking. The whole brain becomes more connected, more fluid, more open. This is what people reach for when they call the experience ego dissolution. Researchers have a metaphor for it. Picture the mind as a hillside under deep snow, and every thought you've ever had as a sled running down the same worn grooves over and over, deeper and deeper. Psilocybin, for a few hours, melts the snow, and the sled is free to carve a new path anywhere on the hill before the snow refreezes. And here is the twist. The legend never saw coming. Everyone assumed the healing was the vision, that you had to take the trip to get the rewiring. But in 2023, researchers built psychedelic molecules that grow those very same connections with no hallucination at all. In animals, these non-tripping cousins healed the brain just as well. And when the scientists erased the new connections, the benefit vanished too. The wires may be the medicine, the vision, just a side effect. That's why psilocybin is now being tested carefully against depression. In 2025, its first large late-stage trial reported that a single dose eased treatment-resistant depression more than a placebo. For some people, for months. It isn't approved. It isn't a finished cure. But the rewiring McKenna imagined is real, and right now it's being put to work. So the mushroom changes the brain. That much is settled. Which brings us to McKenna's real claim, the big one, that this is what made us human, that it built the mind that picked up the first tool, and this is where the beautiful story falls apart. Start with the tools. McKenna put his mushroom awakening at maybe 100,000 years ago, but in 2015, in Kenya, archaeologists dug up stone tools deliberately made and shaped, and dated them to 3.3 million years ago. Not 100,000, 3.3 million. So old they were made before our genus, Homo, even existed. By some earlier, smaller-brained ancestor entirely. Toolmaking didn't arrive with the human mind. It came more than 3 million years before it. And toolmaking has never needed a mushroom. Chimpanzees strip twigs to fish for termites. Crows in the South Pacific bend wire into hooks. Sea otters crack shellfish on stones balanced on their chests. None of them are having visions. Using tools to solve problems is simply something a great many sober animals do. But the deepest problem is the simplest. Even if a mushroom made one of our ancestors sharper for an afternoon. That change lives in their brain, not in their genes. And you cannot pass on something you learned or felt or grew inside your own head to your children through your DNA. A child is not born remembering its parents' trip. That isn't how evolution works. A burst of plasticity in one mind dies with that mind. So however many mushrooms our ancestors ate, it could not, by itself, have rewritten the species. So, did a mushroom build the human mind? No. the story is almost certainly wrong. The tools are too old, the animals too clever without it, and you cannot inherit a vision. And yet, I don't think the stoned ape theory is worthless. Because by accident, reaching for the wrong answer, McKenna pointed straight at something real. He guessed that a humble mushroom could reach into a brain and physically remake it. And against all odds, that guess was correct. He was just aiming it 3 million years in the wrong direction. The mushroom did not write the story of our species. There was no single moment of awakening on the grasslands, no fuse lit in the dirt. We came up the slow way, like everything alive. But that same molecule, the one he built his myth around, can take a single living human brain, one that has gotten lost in its deepest grooves, and for a few hours soften the snow and let it find a new way down the hill. It cannot rewrite our past, but it may, carefully, help rewrite a few of our futures. And there is something almost more astonishing in that. Not an ape, switched on at the dawn of time, but a mind, here and now, being gently taught how to change. And that is where I will leave it. And if there is a mystery you would love to see untangled, tell me. Until the next one.